Now, you might be thinking, Shield Crush? In this economy? Nah. But hear me out. No one played this skill last league, but I believe it's going to be the best melee starter for the upcoming league. One of the best starters, period. Which makes it off meta while also being meta, which is the best kind of meta. Now, there's a few things to note with this PoB. Chiefly that everything in terms of the gear is farmable via some kind of method or drops often enough. You'll see two uniques listed here. This is a common heist unique. We will be playing heist whether you like it or not. And this is a pretty, I wouldn't say a common amulet, but it drops often enough. The price on trade is a bit higher sometimes due to high demand because it's one of the best amulets for melee, but it is something. I got like 4 or 5 of them last league, so it's not too hard to find, not too hard to save up for when you're in trade. It shouldn't be too much. Everything else is generic, bunch of armor and life. Just get whatever res you can. I put a chunk of res in the config just so I can look at my max res correctly, but get what you need. You'll be alright. Get the amethyst springs. No idea what to do with the belt currently. I'll go over that later. But you have a few options there. And you have a shield. And we'll go over shield crafting later. We are crafting our shield. I don't care if we don't have a bench. We're going to do it. We're going to talk about how later. In terms of the stats of this build, we have somewhere between like 1.5 mil to 2 mil DPS depending on your setup and investment once you have a shield. This one has like 2.2k armor. If it had like 2k armor, this would be a bit less. That's kind of the line you want for like an endgame shield, like 2000 armor rare shield. And from that we're also getting up to 92,000 armor. We get a bunch more armor than boneshatter builds ever did. We don't have to use it for not killing ourselves with our main skill, but that's a nice thing because that way we can scale our damage freely. We don't have to think, oh no, I don't have determination yet, so I'm going to kill myself. No, you can just do damage, and your armor is applying to your damage via replica dream feather, but your damage is not dependent on you having higher armor, if that makes sense. And the hit damage is pretty nice. This is with 2 overlaps, so this is what we do with unique bosses, rares and stuff, and whatever's in the middle. Each wave itself does like half of that, so that's the mechanic of Shield Crush. You do double damage to stuff in the center. It's quite a simple skill, really. I think its simplicity is one of the reasons why some people don't want to play it, because it seems boring and mundane. It doesn't actually have an MTX. It's a bit of an ugly duckling kind of skill, but the advantages we get from running a skill like this are too much to pass up on when it comes to trying to make the best value out of a melee build in Ruthless. Now, this tree has I made a few versions in this PoB. We could go through that in a moment. In terms of just other little cliff notes, we don't really invest in block. There's an option to. You can explore that if you want to. I wouldn't, to be honest. I think it's much better going into scaling your pure armor and just using this as a little bonus. You need quite a bit, and then to take like versatile combat to feel like you're getting that much value out of it. This tree is a bit passive point starved towards the end because we will want some points spare. We have like things we can move around here. We will want points spare to take some of these if we get good special tattoos for them. Always keep that in mind if you're planning PoBs at the moment. There's a few other little bits on this endgame tree you can move around, including fixing accuracy at the moment. Let's go over what this build lost in terms of nerfs, because as you see I haven't allocated some of these things. I've put the action effect in the config because PoB is annoying and doesn't have a Ruthless setup anymore. So we're take undeniable. We will be taking undeniable, but we lost a lot of accuracy from losing from the nerfs. Lost a flat 500, lost about another on this build currently like 270 odd. You can get more than that. We'll talk about the Magnate later and how that's maybe a decent option, maybe not, due to the new league. How that might affect things. But yeah, we don't get as much accuracy. We need to shore that up, and you can do that with gear. You get the end game PvP this suggests that we find some gloves with some tier 1 accuracy. There's not that much more important that you need to get, find big accuracy on your gloves. You're happier, because your accuracy from a replica Dream Feather does not apply to Shield Crush. Don't get you baited. But until then, we can just take Eagle Eye. It's a few points. We have to drop something else around here to fit that in. This is a level 90 PoB, so we will be getting into this later. And some of this stuff, like the aura stuff, isn't needed till you have determination, which is later anyway. So you can, there's a lot of bits you can move around. You can kind of fiddle around with it yourself and figure out, oh, this thing is really important, and oh, this thing is interchangeable. Like the mana stuff only is important when you're trying to squeeze all your auras in. Likewise, feel like there's a reservation mod on this hat. It's like, you don't need that until you're really trying to squeeze stuff. That's optimization. This is the end game version. There is a absolute shite version of the gear, which is just whatever you can get your hands on before map. You can see how much the damage goes down because we don't have things like Replica Dream Feather, Duressos and stuff. But in this build functions out of maps going into acts going into maps. I did testing. Acts 1 to 10 on a 1 link. It was fine. And then went into maps. White maps, fine. Already had capped res off gear. I was just farming randomly as I was progressing. And then I twinked it out with some of my later endgame gear for my old Juggernaut, and I was doing like red tip maps even at level 70 without too much sweat. It's a build, Big important thing to note is this. Ignore this until you have a really GG shield, and your really GG shield is going to have a chance to avoid elemental. Where is it? Click it. Chance to avoid elemental ailments mod. Really, really, really valuable for this build. We can fully cap our elemental avoidance without purity of elements. There's no purity of elements in this. Where am I going? Yeah, these are our auras primarily. We don't run purity of elements, we get capped avoidance, so we don't have to worry about freeze, which means we don't take this later. You might want to take it early. It's freeze immunity, it's valuable. Freeze immunity basically means you lose less experience from dying to freeze, because you just will die to freeze otherwise if you don't have this. Unless you have a good flask of it. Like, you could run like dual life flasks, and one of the flasks has freeze removal on it. If you're clever with that, that's an option, and you could just ignore this. But it's kind of comfy just running it. You get a little bit of movement speed from the small node. But yeah, we were talking about this for a sec. We can shore up the accuracy. We'll be taking, because we're not boneshatter, and because we're not trying to kill ourselves in order to do damage. One of the downsides of boneshatter. Boneshatter has several downsides you have to overcome to perform well. One of them is you have to take this, or you will kill yourself otherwise. We don't gain that much from it. We have a big chunk of armor, but this is only going to give us regen versus physical damage. So unless we're taking physical damage, we don't really have an ascendancy point here. It's better, in my opinion, to just go with nerfed unbreakable, which isn't that nerfed. It's 5% of armor applying to elemental damage rather than 8, which is even half. It's more than half, and we still double our body armor, which is really significant since determination lost all its flat armor. That's why it's also significant to run a shield. Shields are now meta rather than two-handed weapons because of the determination nerf. That's why we get to 90,000 armor without flasks. Without flasks. Or molten shell. Where's molten shell? Or molten shell. Oh, molten shell is... No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. 90,000 armor. We can... No, let me just demo. Is it really that much? I did not expect it to be that much. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Okay. So then we take the endurance charge stuff. First one, max endurance charges, and this in Ruthless will have a mod that gives us our endurance charges more frequently back when we're hit, like up to max, which synergizes with Inexorable, which is given that mod to get them when we're hit. We always run this because we're a melee build, so we're stationary whenever we deal damage. So that has a decent node still, and Unrelenting is then valuable because the buffed effect of it gives more physical damage reduction than before. per endurance charge, which is really nice. And it gives still a chunk of reduced elemental damage taken, not as much as before, but still it's more than a 50% nerf, which is significant. It doesn't give the chaos res. It's fine. It's not really fine. It's fine. We'll get it from other sources. It does give bonus elemental res, which frees up a little bit of gear pressure. Um, not as much as something like this, but it's not really worth taking a whole Ascendancy for this, when you can get all this great armor and endurance shit from Jugg. That's why we're still Jugg. Melee chieftain is terrible. Okay, let's go on. Let's go on our early trees. To start out, I would just take a lot of life and bulk. So stopgaps primarily early are Brutus being a bit of a bitch. For Brutus, we just want to make sure we have Warrior's Blood. We're going to have Warrior's Blood, it should definitely be there, but then just take some, usually I would say go with the accuracy first, because, and get the movement speed from this. You're going to miss attacks otherwise, and you should have enough life and life regen to then tank through him with Ancestral Protector. You can probably get both of these, unless you're really speedrunning. I can't remember exactly what level you usually encounter Brutus at. But yeah, we just take this in Act 1. On a boneshatter build, you like rush kinetic implants potentially, because it's or you go up here for martial experience, so you can get the boom 40% increased damage hits. This is a nice chunk of damage. If you're two-handed, we're not. We'll be using a shield. Well, once we've milled for a one, basically, we'll go over the notes later. I would also just recommend taking Diamond Skin as soon as possible, because 20% all res is nice. Merveil deals a lot of cold damage. Basically, as long as we don't die, we can kill things, and certain bosses will do higher elemental damage than we are happy with, so it's better to just mitigate against some of that early, especially when we can't really get... If you luck into a Sapphire Ring in Act 1, it's Christmas, but otherwise you take a bit of a beating from Merveil, even on a big life, having a lot of life as a Marauder. And from there, we rush Precise Technique. And I mean rush. I mean we just go wee and Weathered Hunter. Now you can take this, and well, you take this stuff first because it gives res. But basically, as soon as you have enough accuracy from this to have more accuracy than life, you take the Mastery as well. Take Precise Technique. You don't even need Undeniable to activate this, but you'll probably be clicking this. This is like level 31. You'll be clicking this, and then shortly afterwards clicking Undeniable from first lap. And that will shore up a lot of our damage concerns early. This is a big more attack damage multiplier. It kind of functions like a support gem dropping for you, but it's on the tree. You can just grab it here. The condition to get your accuracy high enough synergizes with Undeniable, giving us attack speed per accuracy, so that helps us when we want to get something like Consecrated Path becoming easier to use to move around with, and just the damage of our main skill. Anyway, after we grab Precise Technique, then we clean up some more stuff for Act 5. In my experience, Acts 3 and 4 were pretty comfortable regardless, as long as you're keeping on top of your shields, for like the base types, trying to get a magic rarity shield, some little bit of armor, extra armor on there, you'll be fine on a one lick. But Act 5 is a tiny bit more spoopy. Generally it is for everyone, because Innocence is a bitch, and Katava can be too, unless you know his attacks comfortably. So it's helpful to have a bit more damage. We're going to focus on getting a bit more damage here, because our defenses are comfortable enough already. Primarily, we can take Gladiator's Perseverance, and this small node here does all the mana leech we really need, even early on. But because it means we're leeching, we can get all the effects of this. We can be on full life with the extra attack speed, and we can also get the increased attack damage while leeching, which is big. And once we have Warlord's Mark, we can easily always have Rage active. You can have Rage before Warlord's Mark with Chain Hook, which is a fun technique you can use for this build early on, because we don't have to take something like Sunder at the Cavern of Wrath waypoint. You can take Chain Hook. It's quite bad for movement, but it's pretty good as long as your main hand weapon is slightly up to date. Deals okay damage at close range, and you can stack Rage quite quickly with it for then having the bonus of Rage against bosses, which you usually can't have unless they have ads that they summon. A bunch do. You don't really use it later on in the campaign, but I used it for Merveil to make things a decent bit easier. It gives some movement speed as well. After getting this, we want to start going down here for a bunch of things, but the first thing I would take out of them is Bastion Breaker, just because it gets through enemy armor pretty well. Beyond that, there's a lot of options of how the tree expands out. We want to start taking a lot more of the increased armor stuff, because once we start finding decent chest pieces in the campaign, we want to make better use of that. Call to Arms is nice to get sooner as well, because having an instant Enduring Cry is going to feel better later on than having to stand there for a moment to yell at things to heal with it. Also, taking Cloth and Chain and this Mastery and getting a relevant helmet for it is really nice, especially for second lab and beyond bleed immunity. And this gives a bunch of res. And we're taking, you see, we're taking a couple of shield clusters. I think this isn't part of it, but you can take this while you're on the way to PT as well. If you ever feel like your damage is lacking, if you feel like you aren't hitting an upgrade, you can always take something like this sooner as well. It's fine. We want to take this later. We don't care too much about the chance to block. That's a little bonus. It gives a bit of damage, but what we really want later on from these things is the masteries. We just don't want them while we're still in campaign much. You don't get that much increased attack damage from this. It could map out to maybe a 20% towards the end of the campaign if you can get like a 700, 800. So that one's kind of okay. But the chance to avoid elemental ailments one, again, isn't relevant, just as this part of the tree isn't relevant until we have a shield with a mod for it. And we will also need a Eldritch Boot mod. Where is it? We need this. So you have to roll for that as well. There's a few components here, and it might take a bit of time to get them, but you can get them unless you get stupidly unlucky, in which case I do apologise. This build is obviously bait for people who have terrible luck in life. But that's just Ruthless in general. For life, we just take what we can take. You can always take the extra small ones if you feel like you want more life, but I don't have a habit of taking them myself that much. We want to take Unwavering Stance, because not being stunned is nice. We don't get that from Unstoppable anymore. For some reason that's ticked here, shouldn't really be. And we're going to go up here, get things like Inexorable. This cluster up here, I don't think it's really worth getting. We take Juggernaut and this later. But this cluster doesn't give that much damage later on. For the point, so there's better things we can take. There are better things, but it's up to you. You get a bit more defensive value, a little bit more block if you care about that. That's a good wheel to take as well. But don't really care about getting another mastery. We only need like 2 for the build. You'll see on this as well. We're not taking any of the aura mana stuff. We will be running a few aura. We want to run vitality, precision, blood and sand. That should leave us with enough mana to feel comfortable doing everything with the mana leech we have. You can always, if for some reason you don't feel comfortable with it, you can always grab some of the aura stuff earlier as well. But this takes us to like level 68 and gives us a good setup for going into maps. And the general mapping tree, again, is a bit different from the endgame tree, because we're still not going to take this until we have a really good shield. You can get, if you get an average shield with an Elemental Avoid mod, you could still try to take this, but you really need the Eldritch mod as well, which you're not going to get until you can start dropping those things regularly. You'll need to take Eagle Eye once we scale our life up more. We'll need the accuracy from this. You're not going to get it very easily on your gear. Important to note that while you're leveling, you can get, with your useless stat stick, because your sword doesn't do much more than maybe provide res. Don't rely on that, you'll need to change it. But it can also provide accuracy, global accuracy, which does apply to Shield Crush. Again, don't rely on it, you'll need to change it, but you can use it early as a buffer to make things comfier for you and your precise technique. And yeah, from this point on, we just start picking up all the armor. We'll be focusing on heist early, trying to get into blueprints as fast as possible. It's not that hard to get into blueprints as fast as possible. You just have to rack up the markers by continuing to do all the contracts. Do all the quest contracts in heist. They give a lot of free markers. They're really good. They're like bonus. They're just bonuses, which is what makes heist really good early on, because you get extra contracts. They haven't really balanced it properly for Ruthless, in my opinion. You can just block all the other mechanics, and then you get these caches that shit out extra maps for you. it's quite insane, as long as you don't die. But this build is pretty good at heisting and not dying, and it's good at delving as well, which is good because we're going to need to delve for our shield crafting. The only other thing I'd really recommend taking before as you're going into maps is make sure we get prismatic skin online. Make sure we get this. If you want to push levels, you'll need this, because most of the time you die otherwise will be because you don't have on-demand corrupted blood immunity. Having it on your flask, not good enough. You will die to just watching your character not have flash charges but have corrupted blood. Unless you have a logout macro you want to use very quickly. I don't really like using one of them. It's kind of annoying. And you can see on here, I'm dropping the life of mana leech node here because ideally we want to get mana leech on one of our rings. Look for that. Amethyst ring with mana leech. Very, 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 very valuable piece of gear. Of course, if you can just keep this on and then not run the mana leech ring, but it's 2 points. We don't really want anything else around here. One thing to note about this build is after the changes to Ascendancies to compensate for some of the accuracy lost and stuff to make things comfortable, my original plan with this build was to put suppression in. You can go, there's this wheel here, we can also just go up here because we're going through here anyway. There might still be a version where it's viable. You can kind of get, I got like theoretically about 88% suppression without any suppression on gear, which isn't bad using the Lucky Mastery. But at this point I wouldn't plan around using it. We get a lot of reduced elemental damage taken from just this and this, so that contributes something. It's up to you to explore those options, because tattoos will dramatically change that. There's no knowing how this build is going to genuinely function. This is a baseline that will work. I could play this right now. If I didn't value sleep, I could just spend the next how many hours there are until the league start playing this build, leveling it, playing it, and it would work. And I could do it without touching the crucible mechanic at all in like a vanilla, dry, like standard league for Ruthless, and it would function perfectly well. So we're just going to see how the new league mechanic augments things, hopefully for the better. It might enable new options with block investment becoming easier. You might consider that. Look into it. In terms of our skill setup, I have a few different skill gems here. I would generally just take Fortify when we can later on. It's always a debate between, like, do you want to run Fortify, do you want to grab it on tree? It's a bunch of points, which way you do it. So I just like to take it as the gem itself. It still results in decent damage for us. There's two things here that give damage, but they give reduced attack speed. And for quality of life, I kind of don't want to run where I can help it. I don't want to run gems that reduce our attack speed, because you see it just drops it by like, that's like 10% less. Yeah, that's a lot less. That's 15% less. Ugh. Pulverize is nice for the AoE, but it is bad for wanting to move around fast, because we will be using multi-strike, which has you have a bit of a tethered to the ground feeling when you're multi-striking. You have to like interrupt it to do things. So you always want to do that second repeat. You want to, the first strike is going to do less damage, so you want to commit to the bit. So it's more flexible. The faster we attack, the comfier that's going to feel. It's going to be like a stealth DPS improvement for us. And we have Vile Ancestral Warchief, probably just Ancestral Warchief for a while until you can find a Vile version. Invest in Alva later for that. Our other totem setup is a 4-link with multiple totems. You only need to link it to one for it to work with the other one. We're Cutting Strike and Maim for extra DPS buffs. That helps push our full DPS up quite a lot. As always with Ruthless, you won't get these skill gems automatically. They're nice when you get them. General priority for things is like try to spend all the most important stuff first. So multiple totems is very high value because it lets you use both your totems. And just supports for your main skill are higher value in general as well. But get this stuff when you can. Auras, we get Blood and Sand for free. We will get that. We'll be muling for that. It's one of the only aura issue. It's a stance spell. You don't get Flesh and Stone for free, but you get this one for free. It only reserves 10% mana, and it's going to give us 50% more area damage. And I say it like that because we're not going to go in Sand Stance. There's no point. The area of effect penalty is barely anything, and we'll be fine with that. Everything wants to come to us anyway. Usually, if it's gonna hurt us, it's we don't have to have Scream Wide AoE to be comfortable with this skill. We can zip around when we get enough attack speed. It's fine. In terms of other auras, though, War Banner is very important for accuracy. Pride is very important for damage. And Determination, again, unticked because the real effect is down in the config. But Determination should be lower priced this league because people who don't use armor aren't going to want to get it, probably, because it doesn't give flat armor anymore. You have to have some investment in armor to gain any effect from it. It's like, which feels like the right kind of design, and it's something I hope they port into main PoE. Like, a lot of damage related. You don't get a bonus from malevolence unless you're investing in damage over time, really. So things should work like that. So we should be able to get this a bit more easily. It will drop more easily for us, but if you're on trade, you should be able to get hopefully for a lower price. Hopefully same supply, lower demand. Not certain about that. Another PoB worrying thing, we're not ticking this because it makes our DPS look silly, but it's not infinitely sustainable. However, it is sustainable often while going through maps, as long as you spam Warlord's Mark. It doesn't take that long to cast on things as you're coming into them, and then whack them, get to 50 rage, start berserking, keep spamming Warlord's Mark, keep the berserk going as long as possible. Gives you 30% more movement speed. That's a lot of movement speed. I mean, with a flask, Jesus fucking Christ, it's pretty good. Oh, so we want to keep that up. We want to keep that. We don't want to. We want to self cast this. You don't want to cast with damage taking it or some shit that's really annoying. It won't function the way you want it to. And even though we're not using a skill that stuns, like boneshatter, we are still going to get this fine, because what you're going to do is put it on normal enemies as you go through a map. As you kill them, the game likes to register that as a stun, probably because death is the best form of CC or something. We also run Enduring Cry. One of the great advantages of not having to run a strike skill is we don't have to run Ancestral Cry to be happy. So we can use Call to Arms Enduring Cry and we get an extra life flask. And it gives additional physical damage reduction and elemental resistance. Well, additional physical damage reduction is not bad either. That's helpful. Last but not least, Valmont and Shell Blood Rage. Before you get cast with damage taken, you're gonna have to self-use these. This build has a lot of buttons, unless you haven't already noticed, and it can get clunky. And please forgive me, but it's not my fault. Blame Chris Wilson and his vision for arthritis, which I don't know, is he immune to or something? Anyway, we want to put this on a cast with damage taken mostly for quality of life. Like, you could left click Blood Rage, technically, but you really don't want to. I don't think you really left click anything on this build. Yeah, it's not really. You don't like left click Enduring Cry. You don't have Ancestral Cry anymore. We're not stancing with left click. So yeah, but you could left click Blood Rage, but it has a very short cooldown, and you keep hearing the sound it makes, and it's really annoying. So, and the difference between level 7 and level 20 is really not that much. It's not significant enough to not be running it on a low level cast with damage taken setup. We're not boneshatter. We won't trigger this automatically ourselves. As I understand, yeah, you have to take damage from hits. You can't spend your life to reach that threshold, but it will trigger reliably, and then you'll mean balls and shells triggering when you're actually taking damage, and you'll keep Blood Rage up, and you'll come when you're mapping, and it'll work. Any more notes on items? Some of this stuff is again slightly aspirational, but nothing out of the ordinary for a character that's gone into the end game properly. There's a few other alternatives to things. You can play around with what this build looks like to have a brass dome, but brass dome you can't use the life mastery, so you have to get some more life somewhere else, because you lose a lot of life going if you find a brass dome. It makes it easy to go precise technique. It could be an option for the build, because hey, it gives us a fuck ton of armor. When you're just leaving maps, none of this stuff matters really. It's going to be whatever. aside from the armor value in your shield. Like if you can, the sooner you can get to like a 1k shield, the comfier you'll be going into like white and then yellow maps. You'll be cool. And then for crafting our shield, we are going to be delving for dense fossils. You're going to get colossal shield bases of the highest level you can get them. Pick them up. Throw 4 armor scraps on them whenever you get enough armor scraps. They don't drop that infrequently, so that's not too hard to do. And then you throw a dense fossil on that 20% colossal tower shield and see what you get. Those dense fossils, they nullify life modifiers. We don't want a life roll on our shield. We want big armor as much as possible, because that's our damage. And if we absolutely jackpot it, then we will get something like chance to avoid elemental ailments, and then we are GG if you get a really high roll. I made a notes section here as well for people who don't want to keep having to revisit the terrible sound of my British voice for advice on this build, which has a bunch more detail I haven't covered yet. We should probably go over these things briefly. We're doing two mules. Technically optional. We get a spare uncarved gemstone, so you could like not take all these all the way, but it's only to Brutus. Building to Brutus doesn't sound that bad. You can get there in like half an hour quite comfortably. So that's like I come home from work usually on a league start day past like 9 o'clock, so I'm late anyway, so this is no skin off my nose. Big note here is make sure you're stashing every shield you find. On these mules, we're not using shield crush, and a big problem with shield crush in Act 1 is we don't actually get a shield at the start of the game, so we actually have to find one, which is a bit of a funny mini game first. You can hopefully get one that's low level, so you can use it right out of the gate for your main character, but otherwise you can just use whatever's worked before for your other characters for a bit. It's fine. We got skill order here. Those are all the skills we get. When you put it like that, you really don't get that many skills during the campaign. It's one of the reasons why the new Guardian rework looks really cool, because you get basically really cool free skills, like active skills. But where were we? Important thing to note here again is that like chain hook is quite valuable to take. Don't just take some random garbage. Use chain hook. Love chain hook. Try to keep your weapon up to date. It will actually do damage to bosses, and it will then build raids for your shield crush to do way more damage to those bosses. Very comfy. And big note on your Marauder mule, because you want to kill Brutus. Because you want to kill Brutus, you want to take Ancestral Protector because it makes it a lot easier to kill Brutus with it. You might struggle otherwise. Your mileage may vary, but you know, it basically it's a decoy totem, but it's not actually called decoy totem, but it does the same job as long as you like position yourself correctly as you're fighting him. He'll just keep hitting it instead of you. It's great. Everything else just makes sense there. In terms of uncarved gemstones, huge thing over boneshatter. We don't have to take boneshatter as our first gemstone. We get our skill, so we can take blood rage first, and then we also don't have to take ancestral call or warlord's mark or mule for either of them. Big problem with boneshatter since they moved warlord's mark to intruders in black reward is if you play boneshatter, you'll find that you get the choice between ancestral cry and warlord's mark, if I remember correctly, unless they've changed that. Which is annoying because you want both and you can pick one. So you have to gemstone one or mule one. Either way, it's a bit of a ball ache. So we take consecrated path on our second one, which is huge, and we can stop trying to use chain movement at all. It still could be occasionally useful on certain situations, but it kind of gets put by the wayside after that point. Start zooming around with consecrated path. It's great. In terms of Ascendancy order, we take Undeniable first because it stacks well with our precise technique rush. This is questionable. Again, if you have a decent freeze flask early, once you've done your second lab, you could look at Unstoppable and say, actually, you know what? This doesn't do shit. So I say run this until you get a GG shield with an LA Void mod, but you could just run a freeze. If you have a decent enough freeze and remove flask, you could just keep that in the back pocket, play reactively. The thing is, it gives like full chill immunity based, not full chill immunity, but like it stops it from going below base value, so it's still nice. Unbreakables, again, like the value of this, like some other stuff here, you get it later when you have like a bigger chest, so it's not insane early, but it's still nice early. Likewise with max endurance, all this stuff kind of stacks together like a big jigsaw puzzle later on. So the order isn't like, you can't really mess up this order. This isn't like boneshatter where like if you don't take untiring, um, you're screwed kind of thing. You can take this stuff whenever, but just take undeniable first. Leveling tips: either keep track of what shield braces drop at certain levels or make a filter for it. As obvious, I would say don't kill a Lyra unless you're playing hardcore and you're terrified of dying. We really want 2 points, especially for new league where the whole league mechanics tattoo system interacts with our 2 points. So we're going to be able to turn extra attributes if necessary into res probably as well. Again, Lyra technically could give more res, but these aren't just attributes we're taking like, oh look, 2 more attributes. These are just like we're transforming the stuff we already have where possible. So that's really valuable to have those 2 points. And as we've seen, we take diamond skin. We drop diamond skin later when we can find more res on gear, but we take diamond skin, we take loads of res off Woven Hunter, we take res here, we get so much fucking res on the tree. You really shouldn't need the res from a Lyra to be happy. Yeah, Bastion Breaker's really good. This build is fine on the 1 link. Keep on top of accuracy. Innocence is horrible, so just don't worry if you are getting a bit stuck on him. Any build will naturally struggle unless they're like lucking out with like extra support gem drops and stuff and killing him faster, because he has attacks that just do insane damage for the level that you fight him at. Been through most of this stuff already. Extra random notes when we're done leveling. Yeah, we're doing Delve for the Dead Fossil spam, we're doing Heist for the Regular Dream Feather, then we're going to be very happy. Multiple turn support's big, War Banner's big, getting Panopticon is big. Yes, for a melee build, yes, we're going to click Panopticon. No, we're not going to path down to it, it's 4 points, and the other 3 don't really do much at all. No, our totems don't die that fast, it's not that important. I don't care about Emperor's Vigilance. I'm sure you can make a build with it, you probably need Seething Fury, but I don't really care. This is a precise technique attack build. In my opinion, Emperor's Vigilance Shield Crush is an entirely different build where you scale crit instead, and it gets wacky, which is quite hard to do in Ruthless effectively, so you have to think about that one, if you get one. This build was actually stronger in Crucible because you could get extra armor from the Crucible nodes, but it's still probably going to be the best melee starter due to boneshatter was the best melee starter, hands down. As proof of that, the rank 1 player on the ladder, Nick, I think it was Nick _ Metaslave, his username was. You can search for it on the I can put an overlay thing later actually on this. He's the rank 1 guy. He was the rank 1 guy for a while, and he said he found my guide on boneshatter helpful. So boneshatter was the best build early on in last league, in Ruthless Crucible, and if I think that build is now getting the nerf hammer and this build will outperform it, then logically it's, I think this build's going to be the best one going forwards. Okay, let's talk about belts for a sec as well. So the magnet is an option, but you want 400 strength to make good use of it, like good use of it. It still gives a decent damage boost if you don't have 500 strength. The problem is strength is the main thing we will be able to dump. We get a bit of a bonus, like we get a tiny bit of accuracy from it, but it's not much, it's not that important. It's because there's less accuracy being granted from the undeniable nerf, we can sacrifice more of our strength notables to tattoos, which makes the magnet less attractive as an option now, but I'm not sure really what we're going to put instead. One option is Arm's Anguish. It gives you triple damage equal to your endurance charges, so you can use this for that, but then neither of these are useful after that, so you end up taking, I don't know, Untiring, which is not as really interesting. Maybe the regen is helpful against like physical damage, but we take so little physical damage in the first place. Like, it's not. How is it? It's 10 seconds. It's an option. We'll look into that. We'll look into that together, me and you. Auras. Play around with auras in your own PoB version of this to find the best way to put everything in, because you want to run. This is running level 7 precision. You could drop something else somewhere potentially. It's kind of hard actually. God, we're so socket starved. If you wanted to arrogance this instead, and then you could take the max res preservation one for extra max res. I'm not really stressed about it myself. Am I missing a? No. I feel like I'm missing max res somewhere. This used to be like. Anyway, we are. Oh, this is not our endgame tree. That will be why. Yeah, it's that. Cool. And yeah, and there's some notes down here like just kind of like concluding on everything we talked about. Why should we play this now with a boneshatter? Bunch of benefits. There's a bunch of benefits to running this, particularly like we get naturally good AoE. We don't have to invest into that. We can invest what we would have invested into that into other things. We can craft our own weapon. We can get full ailment, ailment immune. The regen node is nerfed, so like boneshatter players are going to kill themselves a bunch more than before, and we don't even need to take that. We don't even try to kill ourselves. I mean, we have a life cost of 7 because we're taking this combo with this currently on, but this is all like interchangeable based on your choices. We have similar damage. This is similar to what my boneshatter character was doing at the end of last league, before I switched to like a Vengeance Cascade, Vengeance Crusade, whatever the broken returnee node. You can tell I haven't played in a while. That build. Also, we're less fucked over by map mods. So like stun immunity will mean we can't gain rage from Warlord's Mark, but we will still be able to get our AoE off properly in boneshatter. You can't do that properly, which is a bit meh for that skill. And we save uncarved gemstones. We keep our AoE and stun immune maps when boneshatter loses some of it. We don't get hampered as hard by reduced armor in maps because boneshatter will then start to kill itself. Same with like reduced effective auras. Mainly all the stuff to do with not killing yourself. Boneshatter is a difficult balancing game at the top end in Ruthless. You're trying to squeeze as much damage and attack speed as you can without doing so much trauma that you end up killing yourself. So it's going to be spoopy. I think you can still play boneshatter on a Juggernaut, but I think you should be playing this instead. Especially because Determination lost so much for builds that don't run things like a big shield and a big chest piece. Determination now just gives more armor, and it gives more and more armor, which makes it even better for us. That's how we're hitting 90k without Flask in this current setup. It's great. Yeah, so that's the bulk of the value of this build. This is all available to read in the PoB that will be attached to this video. As usual, this hasn't been the most structured ramble about what I'm doing this league, but I hope it's been helpful to someone. You can see all the pieces, and none of this is too set in stone. As I said a while ago, you can decide like, okay, the damage from this isn't as important. We can put it somewhere else. They recover life on kill from damage. This is really nice, especially for like stuff like Delve, where like bits of damage can creep up on you. You can, study this stuff a little bit, figure out like what you want to do with it. What else we need to take here or there. How we can drop stuff for our notable tattoos. Very excited to see what those will do for this build. I have no idea, which is great. It's nice not knowing what your passive tree is going to look like in the end game. And yeah, that's basically it. Oh, to go over the config very quickly as well. We're PoBing for like 2 seconds stationary. I'm sure this build could stay stationary for longer, but like that's just so we're not like taking the piss. But you can just set. You will end up with this kind of gear, standing around with 100,000 armor without flasks, which is again very funny. Our mapping DPS is high because we'll have frenzy charges, by the way, and why have I got Tailwind ticked? Okay. If you ignore the fact I had Tailwind tick for this entire PoB, I have not done any worrying. That must have been a misclick. And I'm not going to re-record this entire video, so, you know, if you made it to the end, you now know the secret. This build does not have Tailwind. Haha. It still has really good damage. It's not that important. Why don't we take a drone as well? Yeah, there we go. Now we're really being honest. We do have 50 rage tick, but that's just because like I really want to calculate effective boss DPS, and this build doesn't die very easily, so you should be able to get to 50 and sustain 50 quite comfortably. We want a glove mod for that. Another glove option obviously is the adrenaline gauntlets, but then you'll need another way to get rage and bosses. If you want rage still, your mileage will vary on your choices you make with this kind of stuff after that. But yeah, those I can't remember, the adrenaline on leeching life to full gloves are interesting for that as well. We're always leeching, we leech mana. And we should probably put this back to 84 as well. But it doesn't do anything, but I don't know why it was down there. Yeah. Doesn't really do anything either. Okay. Any questions about this kind of build? What stuff is best for and stuff as well? You know, comments are always open. Just let me know what you're thinking about. Anything you think you could improve on or would change. Pretty sure my pathing's correct and stuff. And yeah, I think I'm out of things to talk about. So I hope everyone has a good league start. Anyone planning to do something like this, similar to this, hope it goes well for you. Please don't complain to me if it doesn't. This is Ruthless. It's naturally it's an RNG intensive game mode. You might get fucked over and never get a good shield. I did the entire campaign on a 1-link, so I'm sure you'll be fine. You know, if you get even if you get bad RNG, I never got a single usable support gem for my skill. So yeah, you should be okay. Yeah. See you all on Friday.